Welcome to June 15th, 2021 special meeting of the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors. Sheriff Basilio, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Absolutely. After me, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There was no closed session last meeting, so there'll be no report out or today. So we'll move on to staff announcements. This is a time for county staff to provide updates of upcoming county events that may be of interest to the public. Any staff announcements?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, well, Mr. Osborne. Well,
Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable board members. John Osborne, your Director of Office of Emergency Services. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the planned excessive heat event we're going to experience later this week. We have been cooperating with Public Health and HHSA to deploy cooling centers at 6 locations here in the county. Those locations include the Copperopolis Armory, the Murphy's Fire Training Building, the West Point Lions Club Community Center, Jenny Lind Elementary School, and the library here in San Andreas. Each cooling center will be open from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Starting Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thanks to our friends at the American Red Cross, there will be water and snacks available. And in addition to that, we have partnered with Calaveras Connect so that they can, folks that need a ride to the cooling centers can just dial a ride. It's free of charge, and they will transport anyone that needs to get out of the heat to one of the nearest cooling centers.
thank you, Mr. Osborne.
You're very welcome.
Is there Ms. Corey Allen?
Good morning, Health and Human Services Agency Director. I'm here to provide a quick announcement. On June 13th, 2021, Dr. Caleda in the Calaveras Public Health Department was awarded the 2020 Golden Frog Award from the Calaveras County Chamber of Commerce. The honor was awarded in recognition of the work providing important health care to the residents of Calaveras County during a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. The award was recognized by the United States Congress as well as the California State Legislature. On behalf of this county, all of the Health and Human Services Agency, I want to congratulate Colleen Rodriguez, Dr. Caleda, and the entire Public Health Department team because the work that's done together was absolutely extraordinary. So very well done.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Any further staff comments? Mr. DeBasilio.
Morning, Chair Stopper and board members. I have a couple of things. One, I want to remind people that this weekend they're having the Celtic Fair out at the fairgrounds. Watch the heat. It could be dangerous, as John said. And on the 27th, I believe it is, they're going to have the Derby out at the fair. I just want to make sure that the public is aware of that, keep our county moving forward. And I have a question for the board members. I'd like you to question John Osborne as to why he planned this heat event. I would think that he would not want to plan a heat event. I would think that he would want to subside it, but that's on John. So just ask him. Thank you.
Good question, Sheriff. Thank you. Any further staff comments?
No staff comments.
With that, we'll move on to the public health update, informational item, public health services. Receive an update presentation from staff on COVID-19 novel coronavirus. Ms. Corey Allen, you're back in the hot seat.
Good morning. Let me bring up our slide deck for you. I'm just going to confirm which element you are viewing. It does look like that. Okay. One moment. My apologies, it always changes which element you are seeing. And with slight assistance,
Corey, I think if you go back to your PowerPoint and just hit play from beginning for your slideshow, it should appear.
and so I'm seeing it on my end, and that's where it makes it difficult. I'm seeing a different. Okay, let's try this one more time. It simply changes. What do you see now?
Just
We see you.
It's, bear with. All right. The best I can do here is to simply start from the beginning and recognize that you're probably seeing my notes. Is that accurate?
Corey, currently we're only seeing you.
Okay. Is that better?
Corey, go to
Corey,
share
this
screen.
is Colleen Rodriguez. Do you want me to share from my screen?
No, because my notes are in mine, and I apologize to the public. Each time I test it, it changes when I'm in Zoom, and I apologize. But I think it's important information to share, so if we can just power through.
If you go to share screen again, I think because you have two screens, it's switching on you.
Yes.
So go to share screen and then select the screen you'd like.
Yes, ma'am. The one I want to share.
There we go.
Now, I need to back it up. So what's interesting is when I do it that way, I'm unable to move through the beginning. Okay. It one moment. The only way I'm going to be able to do this is to show you my notes. It doesn't seem to provide me any other option.
When you get to the screen where you're sharing your notes, there's a spot where you can switch display settings.
Yep, each time I walk through that, it works until I'm in Zoom.
Okay.
So I do really want to move on. So thank you very much. This morning is your Calaveras County novel coronavirus COVID-19 update. Today with me is Dr. Ramirez, our County Health Officer. Today what I want to do is highlight some of the important information around the very last day of what was the blueprint or tiered system. Today, June 15th, we do exit that system. California Department of Public Health wanted to be sure that we knew where we exited. We exited in the orange tier, which is tier 3, that's moderate risk. So as of now, we are up 6 confirmed COVID-19 cases to 2,201 since last week. That's an additional, we've also seen an additional 787 vaccinations that have been administered, bringing us to 35,904. Today we sit on 4 active cases, Recovered, we're now at 2,141 individuals, and as of now, we have 0 active hospitalizations. So that tier assignment, as you can see, you are not seeing. Okay, well, I see, are going to be frozen on that first screen until I can find another way. Colleen, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to share.
And you can read all from your notes while she shares the screens.
You got it. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding. It would appear that we haven't tested this, but we have.
So I just need to be given the allowance to share my screen.
Colleen, go ahead and try. You should have that permission now.
Okay, so as you can see, this was the information that I was providing to you based on the different numbers. And so we're going to move on now to the next slide. Thank you. So the tier assignment as of yesterday, highlighted by the red star on Calaveras, is in the orange. What I want to draw your attention to is that last week we saw 3.9 new COVID cases per 100,000 in our population. This week, if you look in the bottom left hand, in our metrics, we are now at 6.5 new COVID-19 cases per day per 100,000. If you now shift your eye to the upper right corner, you're going to see that the state itself is at 2 new COVID-19 positives per 100,000. So this is where the concern lies when we're looking at how we shift beyond the blueprint, is that Calaveras County does have some metrics that we do need to pay attention to. The next metric I want to have you look at, back to the bottom left, we have a 4.3% positivity rate over that 7-day average. The state itself, eyeball up at the top right, less than 1% positivity. So when we talk about why aren't we moving more quickly, we in Calaveras County are very aware of these particulars. So I just really want to make sure that we're aware of that, and then we can move on to the next slide. So of course we're all very excited about the State Public Health Officer's new order. It came out on June 11th. It is effective right now as of today. What it states is that the individuals must follow guidance for the use of face coverings. That information is readily available to you. You can Google those words and you can get very clear information on what that looks like. The restrictions remain for mega events. These are very large, either indoor or outdoor events. And that will be re-reviewed by September 1st. And of course, schools, kindergarten through 12th, will have some additional restrictions, child care programs, and day camps and youth activities. And they're your basic masking, vaccine, and or proof of a negative test. The remainder of the business sectors throughout the state are strongly encouraged to follow recommendations that have been set forth, masking, testing, things of that nature. But what's important to know is that that very first element, the guidance for the use of face coverings, which is really focused on the individual decision, basically states that if you go to any number of sites, including state or local public offices, you will be asked, maybe to will be, depending on how you interpret this, asked to wear a mask. And all entities, posts, businesses, entities of any kind, can choose to put a restriction in place around masking, whether or not a person is vaccinated. So you can see where it gets a little bit slippery between the recommendation and the rights individual businesses and entities do have to make those decisions. And how OSHA has not yet provided its guidance for businesses who work under the structure of CalOSHA. We have a few more days before that will happen. So with that, what I wanted to do is turn the conversation over to our health officer, Dr. Ramirez.
Thank you, Corey. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to take the time right now and remind everybody that even though we're moving forward and we want to put COVID behind us, as I do as well, but we need to remember how COVID is spread. COVID is spread in droplets, and also I want to remind everybody that people who are asymptomatic can still have the virus. So people who have the virus can be asymptomatic and it can perpetuate spread. The good news is that the vaccines that we have are very effective in terms of preventing COVID. They are also very good at preventing severe consequences of COVID. The majority of people who end up with severe sequelae of COVID, hospitalizations, prolonged course, are largely unvaccinated individuals. So prevention is key. If you can help us to spread that word, friends, family, church, schools, your kids when they become eligible, yourselves when you're eligible, which at this time every adult should be able to get the COVID vaccine. Please, please, please help us to get that word out there that vaccinations for COVID is huge for us to kind of put this behind us. It's also very important because there are a lot of variants out there that are that are spread very easily. And the good thing is that a lot of these vaccines are pretty effective at those variants. If you want to get into specifics, I would encourage you to reach out to your physician and you can talk about those specifics and the differences between the different vaccines. Ways to avoid COVID still, social distancing or keeping yourself away from droplets, especially from people who are sick, whether they know it or not, and washing your hands as much as possible with soap and water whenever, especially before and after you're touching your face. And again, please get vaccinated. The other thing I want to remind everybody is that even though we're moving forward with the state health officers' orders, I want to remind everybody that we are still working on our investigations and tracing for COVID. And if you are identified by a member of our public health team as having COVID positive, we're still going to be requiring quarantine. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. Any questions from the board members? Ms. Calloway, looks like you're itching to push that button.
I have questions for either Dr. Ramirez or Ms. Allen. So on June 17th, there could be a possible executive order versus CalOSHA's decision on that day. So how do you know how that might impact? What I'll do is just ask my questions and you can answer as you choose. Versus the executive order versus CalOSHA and how it will impact employees working for county government. What is the percentage of people in Calaveras who have been vaccinated? And the cases that are coming, are there pockets or areas that they're coming, that it's happening in? And for businesses, where do they go, since I gather the blueprint is now gone because the guidance for the use of face coverings is for individuals? What is it that businesses go to for information? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. What I'll do is I will simply Colleen will be responding to a few of those questions. I'll give the floor to her in just a moment. And then the Cal OSHA questions, I believe we will have Judy Hawkins, our HR director, take those on for you as well. Dr. Ramirez, did you have any you wanted to address?
No, I'll defer to Colleen for right now.
All right, Ms. Rodriguez.
Hi, everyone. So Supervisor Callaway, our vaccination rates right now are about 41, almost 42% of our eligible county residents are fully vaccinated, and we have about 51.2% have received at least one vaccine. It's not the worst in the state, but it's definitely not the best. So just echoing Dr. Ramirez's recommendation and the public health recommendation that people please consider getting vaccinated. And I know that Ms. Allen is going to be talking about the various vaccination clinics we have available. Cases that have been coming through the public health contact investigation and tracing team, I wouldn't call them pockets. It's more that what we're seeing is actually a lot more households. And so with one person, and this is just how the disease works, one person tests positive, and then, obviously if they're in a household together, people are exposed, and then that's what we're seeing. So they're not pockets per se, it's just household members that are bringing it into the house and then infecting other people. And so just a reminder that, again, to get folks vaccinated who are age 12 and over. And then were there any other questions other than the OSHA question, which I think HR can take?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So, good morning, members of the board. Judy Hawkins, Human Resources and Risk Management. We are waiting to hear from the Cal OSHA board on June 17th to hear if what their changes are going to be to the emergency temporary standards, which makes up our coronavirus prevention plan, our CPP, that our employees, the policy our employees follow regarding face masking, social distancing, disinfection in the workplace. So what the governor has stated is that the changes that the Cal OSHA board puts in place on the 17th, typically there's a 10-day period before any of their standards would go into place. He would adopt an executive order making their policies effective immediately, so effective the 17th. So that is what the governor was stating regarding the Cal OSHA standards. And so what we would do is definitely take the Cal OSHA changes, update our CPP, and then roll it out to the employees as fast as we can, which if these changes are made on Thursday, we most likely would have the changes out to our employees first thing, or as soon as we can on Monday, or training with our managers. But it makes it difficult when everything is happening so fast, but we will definitely get those changes rolled out to our employees as fast as we can. We do have the options to make our standards a little bit stricter. So those are conversations that we will have to have.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Anything further, Ms. Callaway? Any other board questions? With that, I'll move on to public comment.
Before we proceed, I do want to...
My apologies, Ms. Allen. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I did want to make sure that we had that conversation with Dr. Ramirez, but I also wanted to shift to the mobile vaccination van that we mentioned last week. It is provided to us by the California Department of Public Health, both staffed and the van itself. It operates Wednesdays through Sundays, and it's available to us for a total of 60 days. It does increase our rural access. Walk-ins are welcome. This weekend, Thursday through Sunday, with what Mr. Osborne referenced, the cooling centers, with the heat, we may not operate. It will depend on ability to do so with the weather condition. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that. I'm now going to show you if you can, there we go. The next vaccination clinics today, this morning until noon in Jenny Lind at the Consolidated Fire. Tomorrow, the 16th, San Andreas in the afternoon into the evening from 4 to 7 at the library. Thursday, Railroad Flat in the morning from 9 to noon, West Point Public Library in the afternoon from 2:30 p.m. all the way until 8:30 in the evening. We encourage people to go to myturn.ca.gov to enroll. Colleen, is that how they enroll? Is through that MyTurn?
Yes, they can. Some of the mobile clinics, because we're putting them up so quickly, they actually may not even appear on MyTurn yet, but you can literally just go down there and we have plenty of vaccine to be able to share.
Thank you. And we will be putting out another press release as we did last Thursday with those locations and times. We will do that again this Thursday, so you'll see the extension of what the availability is. I do want to point out we've had a pretty low turnout. So we're trying to get into those pockets of our communities that really need this access. The highest day we had in that last 3-day weekend was 6 total vaccines. The entire 3-day weekend we provided 11. So as you can see, there's still a lot of need to get the word out there that we're available, and we're coming to find you where you are. So let us know how else we can help. And with that, any further questions or comments, I'm available for you.
And I just want to leave you with a plea to the public and to the Board of Supervisors and everybody here. Our intention, our priority with this whole thing is the health and safety of everybody in Calaveras County. We're doing the best that we can to try to help everybody to get beyond this. So we're asking everybody to do their part, and please, please, please help others to get their vaccines. As mentioned earlier, we have within our authority to be a little stricter with regards to our county than the state, and we don't want to do that. We want to move forward, put COVID behind us, but we need your help in order to do that. If we're having numbers that exceed our vaccination numbers, I think it goes without saying where this can obviously get really bad really quick, especially with the newer variants that are circling around and that are a little more contagious than previous. So please help us to help you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramirez. Thank you, Ms. Allen. With that, we'll move to, if there's no further board questions on the new information, we'll move on to public comment.
There is no public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. With that, I want to thank you both for your presentation today, and Ms. Rodriguez and Ms. Hawkins for the answers to the questions. We'll move on to public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard. It's a lot of breathing in a mask. So, public comment. Stacy will, Dr. Ramirez, your microphone's still on, I think, or it says it's off now. I apologize. Andrea? We'll start with the audience, and then we'll move to...
Well, good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrea Colavita-Pinkham, and I am the field representative for Calaveras County for SEIU 1021. And after my end of meeting rant last week, I thought it was time to come and really show my face in person. You may remember that I was pretty annoyed over certain items from the assessor's department being brought up for discussion. You may ask, what was the big deal? Right? We only talked about the budget for the positions and didn't talk about the job descriptions. Well, let me tell you what the big deal is. My team and I were told in no uncertain terms by Human Resources during our meeting on June 1st that they would talk to the CAO and about pulling the items from the agenda. Okay? The agenda had already been posted. Thus, it would look like things were moving forward as usual, but the item would be pulled. It was never discussed or mentioned that it would be brought up in a budgetary fashion. The word used was pulled. I hail from San Joaquin County. Now, I'm sure pulled has the same definition in Calaveras County that it does in San Joaquin. It means removed or withdrawn. Either Human Resources was being cute and didn't tell us the whole story about what they were planning. Something changed between June 1st and June 8th, or they didn't expect us to pay attention to the entire board meeting, or all of the above. Either way, the behavior was not appreciated and does not bode well for building a successful, long-term labor management partnership. So thank you for listening today, and I hope not to have to call in with any more end-of-meeting rants. Despite the significant setback, I do look forward to working with Calaveras County to the benefit of our membership and the community they serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrew.
Further public comment?
There is no further public comment at this time.
Very good. With that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Consent agenda, excuse me, let me start over. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion. With that, any board members like to pull any items? Any staff members that would like to pull any items? Any public members that would like to pull any items?
There's none.
Very, very good. With that, I'll entertain a motion on the entirety of the consent agenda.
I'll move this item, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Toffanelli. We have a motion by Mr. Toffanelli.
Second.
A second by Mr. Garamendi. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote of the board.
Mr. Chair, can we take just a couple-minute break on you?
Absolutely. How many? 5?
5 minutes be fine.
5 minutes is fine, Mr. Toffanelli. We will be back after 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Regular agenda. Number 7, resolution, Sheriff. Adopt a resolution recognizing Lieutenant Dennis Huberty upon his retirement and for his 39 years of dedicated service for the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office. Mr. Toffanelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really feel honored to be chosen by Dennis to read this resolution for his retirement. And I'm going to, since it is a retirement, I got a little bit more, I got a little history here that I want to go through before I read the resolution. But I want to make sure, Dennis, this is a resolution. Once this is passed by the board, that's it. We can't go back. And just to give you a chance, there is one of the supervisors had pointed out that the resolution has an error in it as far as the length of service being the longest serving employee of the county. Apparently there was a couple at 42 years. So if you want to and make the choice, we can come back in 3 years and then it'll be right. You'll pass on it? Okay, all right. Okay, well, we'll get into it. And as long as I've known you, Dennis, it hasn't been the 39 years, but it's been quite a while. And I've had talked to a number of people. And the one thing that they talk about and they know about Dennis has been for 39 years is that he's always had a mustache. He's always had a mustache. I thought it would be appropriate that I would read this resolution with the mustache, because that's the one constant you've had. Now, a little bit of history here. Dennis was born and raised in Calaveras and grew up in San Andreas. He graduated from the only high school at that time in the county, Calaveras High. He's married to his wife Eleanor, and they have two daughters, Kimberly and Lisa. Now this is I tried to picture this next one, Dennis. I really tried to do when I was told that your hobbies were riding motorcycles and playing guitars. So I'm trying to ride a motorcycle and play a guitar. It seems to be very difficult, but for you, I'm sure you overcame the problems and do it very well. In 1982, you're hired by Calaveras SO, and you were a correctional officer in the now defunct jail. It's a pile of rubble over here. And at that time, 1982, there were no computers. There were no cell phones. There were no light bars on the cruisers. However, there was at that time on the cruisers a beacon. You cruised around, and when you wanted to pull somebody over, you turned on your beacon. None of these fancy light bars with blue and red lights or anything else. You had the beacon. 1982. 1982, Reagan was president. That's been quite a while ago. As a matter of fact, there's a total of 7 presidents since 1982 that you've worked through. You had George H. Bush, you had Bill Clinton, you had George W. Bush, you had Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and now Joe Biden. That's quite a long time that you spent when you think about it. You've worked through 7 sheriffs and was able to maintain a job during all 7 of those sheriffs. You had Ballard, Garrison, Nuttall, Grasmick, Downham, Kuntz, and DiVasilio. And there's a little bit of controversy about that list, but I got it from the sheriff himself. So, and the other thing is, I was going to go through the number of supervisors since '82, but we might get you the 42 years in by the time I got to the end of it. So, but I did want to bring up that 1982. Supervisor Stopper was 7 years old at that time.
Thank you for that.
Supervisor Fallendorf wasn't even born at that time. Jack was 12 years old. I was 11.
Yeah.
And I have here a note that Marita was, what, 51? And I had a conversation with the sheriff yesterday, and we had budget last week, as you know, Dennis, and I want you to be very proud of this next item that I'm going to talk about, because it's a tribute to you. We had budget last week, and the sheriff wanted 3 new deputies. And now it's very obvious through the conversation yesterday that he needs 3 deputies to replace you. I think that was great. And with that being said, I will read this resolution. although it's more like a proclamation, but it is a resolution. This is a resolution recognizing and honoring Lieutenant Dennis Huberty upon his retirement from the Calaveras County Sheriff's Officer for his 39 years of dedicated service. Whereas Dennis Huberty was born and raised in Calaveras County, graduating from Calaveras High School in 1977. Whereas Dennis has worked for the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office since February 22nd, 1982, where he began his career as a correctional officer. And whereas after 3 years as a correctional officer on May 11th, 1985, Dennis realized his new calling as a Deputy Sheriff 1, where he was assigned as a patrol deputy. Whereas during Dennis's 39 years of service, he has held the following ranks: duties and specialized team assignments: patrol deputy, defensive tactics and baton instructor, narcotics investigator, and field training officer. Dennis also served 23 years on the dive rescue and recovery team and 17 years on the SWAT team. While on the SWAT team, he served in the roles of entry team leader, chemical agent instructor, counter sniper, and tactical commander. On June 16, 1990, Dennis was promoted to the rank of sergeant, where he served as a detective sergeant, administrative sergeant, narcotics sergeant, field training sergeant, and patrol sergeant. On July 7, 2017, Dennis was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. He has been assigned as a jail commander and a Special Operations Division commander and Special Operations Division commander and Operations Division commander, where he has had the middle management oversight of a variety of personnel, specialized teams, and duties under the purview of the Office of the Elected Sheriff. And, hold on 1 second. Whereas Dennis should be recognized and congratulated for serving as one of the longest tenured employees and the longest serving employee in the Sheriff's Office in the recorded history of Calaveras County. Quite an accomplishment, Dennis. Very nice. And so, with that, is there any board comments?
For me, this is sort of a bittersweet moment because Dennis has been part of my SO environment since I've been on the board. And we had a lot going for us when we were trying to build the jail. A lot of meetings, a lot of out-of-town visiting other jails. And having him gone is like having one of my icons deleted. So Dennis, I mean, if you want to stay till 42 years, we'd be happy to have you. But it's truly been a pleasure and an honor to work with you all these years. Thank you.
I haven't had the opportunity to know you, sir, but dedication to service, the amount of time, and dedicating yourself to the peace of Calaveras County, we appreciate it.
Any other board comments?
Anytime somebody can do 39 years of anything is a remarkable achievement, and serving your community for that long is a real gift to all of us, and thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you for your service. I don't think we can be gay stand up.
Public comments.
I would just like to say on behalf of our family.
Can you come up to the microphone?
I'd be happy to. I would just like to say on behalf of our family how extremely proud we are. Mom! 39 years is such an accomplishment, and it is such an example that was set forth for my sister and I he was the example in our lives always. And he's always been our hero. I've said it before, and I'll say it for the rest of my life, that he's our hero forever. And we're so proud of you, and we could not be more lucky to have you as the man in our lives. And we are so excited for this new chapter. I know Mom is excited to have someone to help more around the house. I know I'm excited, a new babysitter maybe? No? We'll talk about that later, but we love you so much, and congratulations, Daddy.
Yay. Any other public comments?
My name is Kent Mitchell. I'm a retired deputy sheriff from here. And I've worked with Dennis when he started in 1982 and when he started out as a reserve. And he ended up being my supervisor as a sergeant for field training officer, stuff like that. And I consider him more than a friend, as family. And I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of all these guys because I've worked with a lot of them. So I just want to say, Dennis, you're a hell of a man. Thank you, people. Yeah.
Well, as the sheriff now, I have to say that when I started here, Dennis was a sergeant at the time, and he was my patrol sergeant. So there is no better feeling than being somebody subordinate to being their superior. It's been a lot of fun. I can do a lot more as his superior in telling him to do things, and he's also older than I by about 13 months or so. So the old man jokes work out real nice for me. But it's been a pleasure working with Dennis. He was a great sergeant when I was on patrol. Well, he'll be missed, but he will be back because he's going to come back as an extra hire in the courts for us. So he's going to continue to work for our county. So thank you, Dennis.
Any other public comments?
Thank you very much. Oh, nice mustache, but it's cocked a little bit to the south.
Sorry. I didn't have a mirror right.
Really briefly, I just want to thank my family they sacrificed a lot. Missed birthdays, missed holidays, missed anniversaries, missed a lot of things that this job requires of us. And I couldn't be prouder to have people stand by me in uniform. They're the best the Calaveras can offer as protection to the citizens of this county. And it's been a real honor to be associated with such fine people from 1982 to today. And I understand that we have over 500 retirees, or total employees. When we started the badge, the numbering system, we started with number 1. I think we're in 540? 540 now. I won't say that my number's 17 because that just dates me. But we've seen a lot of people go through, and they've just been great. And I've been real proud to work for the county. And I just thank the board, for the support to the sheriff's office. And I'm going to miss these people behind me because they really are the very best. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other public comments? Hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I'm open for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Callaway.
I'll second.
Second by Stopper. Any other board comments? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
No.
I didn't call for no's yet.
Yes.
Okay, so we have any no's? Passes 5-0. So. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Lieutenant Dennis Huberty is honored for his dedication, wisdom, mentoring, hard work, and humor during his 39 years of service as Calaveras County Sheriff's Office. Dennis, you want to come up?
Where's all the left hand? Hold this way.
Come on.
Jerry, you gotta put that stash back on.
With his cricket, I didn't read it. Stacy, you're exactly. Got it? Good work. Good work. Okay, hold on, one more.
Ms. Cowley.
Can we get, Rick, can we get all the sheriff's officers up here if we can fit?
Come on, Jim. I need you.
After you guys, after you guys. Come on, get you all up here. Around is like it up.
Are you sure?
Yep, sure. Hold it up. Hold it up.
And
Well, you go up there and start pushing some buttons to see what happens.
would someone, a family member like me, to take a picture, go down so they can get a picture?
Come on, Miss Tia. You can lay down on the floor.
Oh, wow. I'm not gonna...
Could you smile, Officer Wade?
Hit us?
You good?
Okay, one more without me in there, and all of us and installed it.
Sweetheart.
Oh, there we go.
You gotta reach.
Smile.
You all fit.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
I felt more natural being on that side.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Very good presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Toffanelli.
You're welcome.
With that, let's take a 10-minute break. What was that, Gary? Class act. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to, because of posting times, we're going to move to item 11. The hearing will commence at 10 a.m. or immediately after the conclusion of any item being discussed or acted upon at 10 a.m. So item 11, informational item, County Clerk, Recorder, and Registrar of Voters. Conduct a public hearing and receive a presentation on the 2021 county redistricting process. I am opening the public hearing.
Good morning, Board. I'm here today, Rebecca Turner, the Registrar of Voters, to go over the county's current redistricting plan along with timeline of events and the tools that are available to the public at this time. So if we don't have any questions to start, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Thank you, Ms. Turner.
Maybe I'm going to share my screen. Let me see.
We do see it.
It's good. I see what was happening this morning, though.
That looks better.
Right. So the Calaveras County Redistricting Plan for 2021. A lot of this is, the dates wise, is subject to change. So as we go forward with this planning process, I'll be speaking with you guys about when you want to do the next public hearings. Ideally, we would hold them in the supervisorial districts. So here is a current map of our supervisorial districts. At this point, we don't have any real data from the census, just estimates. And a lot of my estimates are based off of voter registration data, so it's not a clear picture of what we'll really see when the raw data comes out. So we're hoping to get some raw data in August that'll at least give us an idea of what size, what population changes have occurred in each supervisorial district. Based off of just voter registration data, we're estimating that District 2 population has shrunk and District 4 population has grown the most. So we'll see what happens with that. So every 10 years, districts are required to be redrawn in order to keep the county population in each supervisorial district roughly the same size. That way we have equal distribution and equal representation. So in Calaveras County, the Board of Supervisors is responsible for drawing those lines. And we're going to talk a lot about communities of interest because the new laws require us to really take into consideration what the community believes are important areas. And so we also came out with a mapping tool that will allow the communities to decipher for themselves and tell us what is important to them so that we can try to keep those communities together when we redraw the lines. So requirements, we're required to redraw our lines no later than December 15th. There is a caveat to that there's also election codes that require it to be done at least 28 days prior to the opening of petitions in lieu, which happens to be December 15th. So there's some question there what date we really need to have this done, and being as we're not expecting the data early this year. Typically we'd have it by May, and we're going to be lucky to get it by September 1st. We're going to try and squeeze a lot in that last couple months after the data is received. So we're also required to have 4 public hearings. This will be the first pre-draft map public hearing. We need to have at least one more. We need to have at least one pre-draft public hearing. I'm suggesting that we do this one along with at least 4 more in each of the supervisorial districts or near them. I think there's been some talk about District 1 and 5 sharing a draft map public hearing, and that is up to the board how they want to go about that. And then we have to have at least 2 public hearings after draft maps are drawn. at least one of the public hearings has to be held on a Saturday or Sunday, or 6 p.m. on a weekday, Monday through after 6 p.m. on a weekday. And then just basic things. If we combine a public hearing with a regular scheduled board meeting, it has to have a fixed time, as we did today. And then the county has to be encouraging public participation in the process. So doing things such as having public hearings outside of the typical San Andres site in the different supervisorial districts is a way of engaging public. We will also go over our public outreach process as I go through these slides. So MAP criteria, we still have to follow federal law, which the whole point of redistricting is equal population amongst the districts. We want to make sure that we're not taking things into consideration that could be considered discriminatory. So we can't gerrymander or draw the lines based off of other criteria besides what is suggested in federal law and state law. So some of the rate priorities that we need to be looking at this point are a lot of this says to the extent practicable, because our population is very rural. Some of these designated criteria are difficult for Calaveras County to take into consideration, because our number one priority is still equal population. And even though we are required to look at these communities of interest and try to keep things together, we still have to look at equal population, and that needs to be the top priority. So to the extent practicable, supervisorial districts have to be geographically contiguous. Geographic integrity of any local neighborhood or community of interest shall be respected, so that when they say that, so if we had a subdivision that considered themselves a community of interest, we should try with every means to not split that subdivision if possible. That's not always practical, because we might have another subdivision that also thinks they're a community of interest or is a community of interest or another location. So we have to take all of this into consideration when we draw the lines and essentially try to not split any community of interest if possible. So we're essentially trying to keep everything intact. I'm not going to read the entirety of this MAP criteria to you, so I'll keep going at the community of interest. Communities of interest are anything that share a social or economic interest with the other grouping in their community. There are a number of categories that this could fall under. Some of the ones that I think might be more significant to Calaveras County is like ag communities, or communities that may grow similar crops in the same area, or cattle ranches. But it could be anything from a shared interest in a dog park to educational backgrounds. So for public outreach, we will be doing press releases as we announce public hearing dates. We will be offering live translations, and if it requested in advance of a meeting for any of these, we will sending postcards to each household in the county once we receive information about those public hearing dates. So we're going to try and engage the public as much as possible to make them aware of what's available to them and how they can get their maps and comments submitted to us. But this is one of the bigger changes with the new redistricting laws, is that we have to be engaging and trying to engage the public to participate in the process. Record keeping is another big change. In 2011, there were no particular requirements for record keeping. Now our webpage has to be maintained until the next census. It has to include an explanation of the redistricting process, procedures for submitting public comments, a calendar of events, And then recordings of each public hearing. So this is the part that I find interesting. If we do a formal public hearing attached to a board meeting, that's easy because we have the minutes from those board meetings and we also have the video. However, on the what I would consider less formal public hearings or the supervisor-led workshops, we need to take into consideration how we're going to have a recording or written summary of those meetings. So I don't know if we just have a clerk sitting there taking minutes of the meeting, but if we wanted it to be less formal, I wouldn't think we'd be in the same setting as a board meeting. It would be talking to people one-on-one. So that's something we'll have to take into consideration as we plan those meetings. So the county website went live on May 13th. It contains an overview of the redistricting process, a timeline to give people an idea of what to expect. Several of the dates are still listed as to be determined. So I'm hoping that in the next few weeks, I'll be talking with you guys about when you want to hold public hearings in your area and where, so we can start scheduling those, or if they're going to be virtual. But I'd like to talk to you guys and get that started. And then our website also includes a method for electronic map submittal. We're calling it Community Mapper, and that's where members of the public can go on and draw their own maps and submit their communities of interest, along with submit public comments and comment on each other's maps. So for the timeline right now, we went live on May 13th. We're holding our first public hearing today. July through September is ideally when we'll hold the supervisor-led town halls. And then we start to get into some of the unknowns. We're told at some point between September and October we'll receive the census data. That's when we'll receive the census data in actual format we can use to start drawing our maps. I'm told that we may receive raw data that's pretty unusable, roughly August, but that'd at least give us statistics on the population of each district and if how many changes may be necessary to get our population equal. So once we receive the census data, we would then present that to the public so that they have the opportunity to submit draft maps as well. And we have to give the public, I believe it's 20 days of having that data prior to us releasing our first draft map. So we have to essentially have a conscientious effort that we're not going to draft something before the public has the opportunity to draft their own maps. So as soon as we receive the census data, we'll release our draft map hearing dates. Because of these timelines associated with giving the public time to draft theirs, it's hard right now to have a definitive date because we don't know when we'll receive the census data. So like I said, a lot of this will be changing as we get more information. But the most important date is we have to be done by December 15th. And I don't know if you've heard anything further, Sarah, but I'm looking that something needs to be approved by the board by November 15th in order to make this December 15th deadline. So I say that because there's a lot of legislation being drafted right now in regards to these deadlines, because we're not the only county with this short time crunch and everyone's trying to figure out how we're going to get it done. So the current legal deadline, December 15th. However, petition in lieu period opens December 16th, and we have to have the maps drafted at least 28 days before we can actually open the signature in lieu filing period. So supervisor-led town halls, we're preparing for in-person with virtual attendance option. At this point, it's pretty up in the air exactly what we plan on doing at those town halls. We should have current supervisorial maps. We'll have the community mapper available for people to submit maps right there or submit public comment. And then staff will be available along with the supervisors to explain the redistricting process, how to use the maps, and collecting public comments. And then I noted again, like, how are we going to formalize for the purpose of retaining for 10 years? So the community mapper is now available. I'm hoping Doug is on the call. Doug Polzoni is our GIS, and he is our mapping expert. He created the community mapper. It took him a lot of hours, and he did multiple versions before we came to what we have now, which is a pretty awesome version. I think there's a lot of counties out there now trying to replicate what we created. So it allows the members of the public to submit their community of interest, explain why it should be split between, explain why their community of interest should not be split between more than one supervisorial district, and then make comments on maps submitted by others. So I am going to open that up. So this is what Community Mapper looks like. Does anyone have any questions before I move on?
I don't see any at this time, Ms. Turner.
Okay. I'm trying to, it's really hard to just continue talking to you guys, and I can't see your faces, and so I'm like, I think everyone's following along, but I have a tendency, I guess, to read the crowd, and my computer is...
We'll let you know if we have questions as you proceed.
So when you, from our main website, you can pull up the redistricting page, and then the redistricting page brings you to this community mapper, and it gives instructions as you first open on how to create a community of interest. There's an example in here, primarily so that if somebody had any questions, they could open up the example. You'll see that this community was drawn. The reason for this community was to save the library. It's a local group who is very interested in their local library, and so that would be their common bond. And then you can also give comments on each map submitted. So if we go back out of this, it shows the current boundaries for the supervisorial districts. There's a legend over here so that you can zoom in, zoom out. You can pick your base map gallery, so you can pull up if you wanted imagery underneath, which gives the orthos of our county so that you can see where you're at. It's based off of the parcel layer. We thought that that would be what people associated best with, is if they could find their location, and then use that. I'm gonna go back home. So there's several different layers, and people could look at in here and determine what was best for them to associate for drawing their map. So if you wanted to draw a map, you could select the bottom here to submit a community. It then requires you to fill out the information. We're requesting that people fill out the information first because it's more important that that we get the rationale behind your map than the map itself is, because that's helping us determine what level of priority that this community of interest should be given. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. This community of interest that I am submitting right now is historic San Andres. And it's a sample. Obviously, we are going to take into consideration that every town is a community of interest. But what we're asking people is what is important to them about their community. And some of this seems somewhat redundant, but it's not. We really just want people to explain to us what they're thinking as they drew this map and why it's important. And then it also asks if you want to be associated with a certain district or a nearby location, or if you don't for some reason. Maybe you're on the boundary of District 2 and 3 and why you'd want to be associated with District 2 versus 3, which could be something as simple as there's a mountain ridge line and you have more in common with the district on this side of the mountain versus the other. So once you've filled in all your information, you can submit your map. Apparently I have an error in here though, and it doesn't. Oh, it wants my address. So this is a good example. If you don't fill everything out, it's not going to let you submit your map. So you do need to fill out each of the text boxes. Oh, yeah. And then you can go in and draw your map. So I'm going to really quick show you guys how simple it is to draw a location. So to start drawing, you just click at some point in the map, and then you can drag the cursor to each of your location. So I'm just following parcel lines right now. And then I could say, and you could make it as detailed as you wanted or less, as long as we get a vague idea or a good idea of what your map was trying to contain. And then once you double click, it draws the polygon and you can report. So now the community has been submitted. At this point, if I go back out to look at proposed communities, it's not available for the public to view until somebody that's reviewing maps has the opportunity to go in and review it and then say, yes, make it publicly available. So that is how easy it is to submit a community. I'm going to stop sharing. And at this point, we are just waiting. We are waiting to finish the timeline for when we're going to conduct our public hearings. We're waiting to receive census data and awaiting further changes to the process or timeline from the legislature. So that is all I have to share. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Turner. I just want to reiterate some of the things that you brought up. You know, the timeline is very important. Typically, we'd be receiving the census data or preliminary census data in May. It's pushed back as far as September to October. And then by October, we have to have a draft map based on the information that may not come in until as late as October. And then within all that, we have to collect public comment and then have it done by November 15th. For October is the approval of the draft map, correct? And then November 15th is approved by the board so that we're ready 28 days prior to the deadline in December. That's about it. It seems like a real short runway that's out of our hands with the census data coming from the state at such a late time.
Right. So the positive in this is we're required to engage the public. So it gives us lots of time to engage the public, but it gives us very little time to come back and actually draft a map.
Well, and I think part of the process of engaging the public is actually coming out with the statistics that we need to facilitate doing the map. So it's a double-edged blade there. Plenty of time to engage the public, but without the data in hand. Ms. Callaway.
Ms. Turner, is it still the goal of redistricting of 17 to 21% or 22% population split for each supervisory district? Has that changed?
Right, we'd want as equal population as possible. So with 2010, we had 45,000 citizens, so we want to as close to 9,000 in each district as possible. So we want to keep it as equal as possible, but we don't want more than a 10% deviation from any one district. So,
okay. What about tax rate areas? Are tax rate areas to achieve the redistricting, would tax rate areas then have to change?
Well, yes and no. So tax rate areas would not change. I don't know if there's some requirement that the auditor redraw the line so that they don't pass supervisorial districts, but as far as I'm aware, that's not the case. Voter precincts, though, and we follow the tax rate areas when we draw the voter precincts, have to be redrawn because each precinct has to be contained within a supervisorial district.
I mean, we're going to have these public hearings pre-data. So the public really generally wants to know, how does this impact me? And your example of like District 2, District 4, I mean, the residents aren't going to know the impact till after the data is available. So shouldn't we want to have public meetings, especially in those areas where the residents could be impacted more? I mean, I'll use an area that I think, Vallecito, for example, I think should be a combined combined community of interest. Whether it goes in District 3 or District 4, to me, isn't as important as the fact that they should be a community of interest. But we're not going to have that information until the data's in, or like you said, District 2's losing, District 4 is gaining. So, all of a sudden, District 2 now has Arnold, and how do the people of Arnold
that
feel
is one of the rules, is that we should follow geographic or man-made geography. So we really should not be cutting over and giving District 2 Arnold, because there's not an easy way to travel from Arnold and get into District 2, or a common way to do that. So a ridge line, like we have between 2 and 3, would be a line we need to continue following.
For me,
but Vallecito is a good is a good example of an area where they may consider themselves a community of interest. And so even regardless of what the data comes out as, I would highly recommend anyone in that area who wants to stay in one supervisorial district to submit their area in the community mapper and tell us why they would like to be considered. It could be as basic as we're a town and we feel we're losing our voting rights by being split into two different districts. We'd like to be held in one district. So those are the things that we can do ahead of time without knowing census data. If there's communities of interest that don't believe they're split, should be split. I think there are several areas along the district boundaries right now that if I was in them, I would want to make my concerns or voice heard that there's some areas that I think are in District 2 right now that probably should be in District 3 and vice versa, just the way the lines were drawn before. And if you feel that your community is more aligned with one supervisorial district based off of you have more common interests because of the school district or anything like that, people should start drawing their maps now to suggest why they need to be in one particular district or just why they need to be kept whole, and it doesn't matter what district they're in.
This does not impact the school districts, though. Or does this impact the school districts? Let me
So it could impact Calaveras Unified because they have representation that is, they're voted by district, whereas Vallecito Union and Bret Harte are not voted by district, so they would not be doing a redistricting.
So that would be the same for CCWD?
Yes, so CCWD should be looking at this process right now as well and determining if they need to redraw their boundaries.
Okay, so let me go back to I would like to see, and I know this puts more work on you, that those areas that we know would be really impacted, like possibly District 2 or District 4, it doesn't matter which areas, that we have public meetings post data. Because if I go to a public meetings prior to that, well, how's that going to impact me? Is that going to change? And all we're going to say is, gee, we don't know. So I'd like to see more of the public meetings post data. That's just
I see your perspective there and why you would suggest that. I can't guarantee that we'll have the time frame to do that and then be able to really use that data to take that all in and be able to use it and then draft our maps as quickly. But even if we did it at least we have time to digest that information they suggested to us, and we know we need to take it into consideration when we start drawing, when we have the data. So I think the more data we can collect in advance, the better the process will be in the end when we receive the census data, because we'll already know that we need to take these different areas into consideration once we receive the census data. So we can focus at that point on drawing a good map for all of the communities that submitted maps to us.
all right. Thank you.
Any further board questions? You looking at law contender, Gary? Right. Oh.
I do, Rebecca, the primary next year is not till June, it's not in March, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fullendorf?
I have two questions and they're more technical. That video with you clicking on the maps and all that and filling in the blanks, are you going to record that by chance so then the public, like a how-to video, so they can watch it?
I have been asked that. I'm hoping Doug will help me and it'll look less clumsy if we record it. So that is a good point, and we probably should do something like that.
Okay. I think that previously John Osborne offered to be the little guy that goes around on some of this stuff. Didn't
Oh,
he
John will
with
do
the
it? That's good.
Didn't he do that with the dashboard at one point?
Yeah, I think there was a member of the public I heard that volunteered and did the video for us. So if I can find out who that is, get her to do
I
another
meant
one.
like
That
the
would be
little
great.
guy on the cruise show, you know, them clicking on stuff. The other question is more about the survey. I understand that map you just showed allows to capture information, but are you going to do a different type of survey collection, like Google inputting or SurveyMonkey or any of those type of things?
At this point, we were not planning on it, but it's not out of the question. Any ideas you guys have that you think would help us collect more data, we can definitely look at. So we could definitely look at doing that. We are trying to keep it all collected in one area, ideally, so that we weren't combining data. We could have one house for it to all be stored in.
And that makes sense. I just was thinking of the public and what they...
Like if we could send out a mass email of some sort and...
Video. Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Your battery's really low right now.
We're plugging our stuff in before we go down. Thank you, Stacy. Any further board questions or remarks? Is there anything else, Ms. Turner, you would like to bring up before I go to public comment?
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Okay, then public comment.
I do not see any public comment at this time.
Okay, give it a second longer, just to make sure there's ample opportunity with the delay. Thank you, Stacy. I'll bring it back to the board. We'll close the public hearing. And it's just an informational item, so I don't think we need to go any further on this. Okay, so we get to go back to, want to make sure I get this right. Item 8, informational item, administrative office. Discuss and provide staff direction regarding centralized versus decentralized government operations. Ms. CAO.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Krista Von Latta from the Administrative Office. The item that we have before you today is to discuss policy level direction as it relates to whether your board prefers to decentralize, centralize, or use a hybrid model as it relates to how we move forward in making recommendations with respect to facilities infrastructure. With that, I will pull up a PowerPoint. Okay, so to move through this discussion, we'll start with a bit of background, have an overview of the county facilities, talk about the things that we need to consider when making this type of policy decision, and have a discussion with the goal being high-level policy direction from your board that county staff, the Strategic Planning and Financing Committee, and other stakeholders can bear in mind when making recommendations to your board. So by way of background, currently we have a hybrid model is how I would describe it, and just in terms of making sure we're on the same page in terms of language, a completely centralized model would literally mean that every service we provide as a county is more or less in the same geographic place on county-owned property and county-owned and maintained facilities. Completely decentralized would be clearly the opposite of that. And what we currently have, I think, is closest to a centralized to hybrid model, where we see that we have many of our county facilities located in San Andreas and in close proximity to each other, but not all on county property and county maintained buildings, etc. So current and recent issues, but issues that I believe have been present in the county for likely a span of many years. We know, for example, that Animal Services is looking to build. There is actually currently land that has been set aside by the board for that purpose. The District Attorney building that has been in play for some time. HHSA leases, most notably the recent lease that's at the corner of Mountain Ranch Road and Highway 49. In addition, a lease, potential lease for public health. And then in addition, and throughout this, the most recent years anyhow, there have been intermittent opportunities to purchase buildings, in some cases buildings that were already being leased by some of our county agencies, and in other cases new properties that would be then developed by county agencies and appropriate funding available to them. Also, by way of background, as you'll recall, the Strategic Planning and Financing Committee was recently created by your board, and two of the pillars of that community are to look at county infrastructure and community engagement. In other words, in addition to simply engaging, but to provide services being the ultimate goal to our community. And so this question has arisen both in the context of that committee, but in the context of conversations that I have had with department heads who are trying to figure out how and when and what the most appropriate way is to make recommendations or have discussions with your board in terms of what future development and infrastructure might look like in terms of their agencies. And of course, then the larger construct and overarching issue is what we're here to discuss today, to help give guidance and help shape how those conversations and that research might go, which is essentially, does your board want to give policy level direction on whether the preference would be something closer to a centralized model, closer to decentralized, or the hybrid that we essentially have now. In addition, I'll note that we have at least 3 large parcels of land on government center property, a fourth that I recently became aware of that might be appropriate for developing at some point. So there are opportunities, should your board wish to give the direction to centralize, for us to focus efforts, do things such as a feasibility study if need be, et cetera, to figure out how to move forward in that direction. Just as a reminder, nothing that is discussed here today will bind your board in any ongoing or permanent way, but it will facilitate the work and the legwork that staff will do in order to make recommendations to the ad hoc committee, the strategic planning committee, and your board ultimately. So also just by way of background, in anticipation of this meeting, in addition to other feedback that has come to the administrative office over the last few years on a case-by-case basis, we did seek department head input last week to see whether there were particular concerns that department heads thought we should address, and to get a general idea of, what county-owned properties are being, or county-leased properties, and how many employees, et cetera, are in use right now. So what do we have? 16 leases. This is a non-exclusive list. These are the responses that we received from department heads, but by and large, San Andreas, you'll note 10 of the 16 leases, and far and away the largest cash outlay on an annual basis are right here in the greater San Andreas area. And those facilities house approximately 187 staff members. There are 6 leases in other locations, Angels, Copper, Mountain Ranch, Railroad Flat, Valley Springs, and West Point. And you can see here, these are not exclusively, but largely satellite locations. And so at $70,000 and 9 staff members housed between them. In terms of general fund, and we've taken libraries out for the purpose of this discussion. There are 2. And I apologize for the typo there.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Do those include, or in Valley Springs, West Point, Railroad Flat, SO substations?
No.
No, okay.
So I apologize for this number here. So approximately $224,000 in general fund, excluding libraries and any SO substation. Oh, pardon me. And this is basically ag and probation, and then to archives, clerk, recorder, elections. So those are the straight general fund hits. The lion's share of the rest of it, upwards of $900,000, is non-general fund, and that would have those facilities house the day reporting center and certain departments within HHSA. So, and this is again a non-exclusive list, but one of the biggest considerations has to be service delivery. How do we serve your constituents and our community members the best, while taking into consideration the other pragmatic aspects of where to house our facilities? We know that we have confidentiality concerns, and so certain of our facilities are currently separated from others in part based mainly on those confidentiality concerns. So you can think about it, I mean, just to give an example, I don't know that we would necessarily want someone who is from probation, or on probation rather, to necessarily be in the same elevator as a district attorney who had prosecuted them. I mean, that's kind of a extreme example, but for either party. That's just one of many examples, and so we would need to be incredibly thoughtful when it wouldn't work, for example, to necessarily say let's put 100% of HHSA in a building without then having really thoughtful conversations about which of the community members they serve may or may not want to enter through the same interest. Would it be appropriate? Would we be potentially breaking their confidentiality? And it's not that those issues can't be overcome. They certainly can be, and there are a myriad of ways to do that, but they need to be considered. So we need to make sure that we bring in all the relevant stakeholders to the table and do that research before or as we're making recommendations in terms of particular buildings, for example. Again, none of these issues are things that can't be addressed, but they need to be contemplated in the development and design process. So maintenance. We know that it's expensive for our facilities department to maintain county facilities not on site. On some level, we can't get around that, but it is true that even some of our leased facilities that we expect and are legally can hold those landlords to maintain, there are occasionally emergencies where our facilities team needs to get in the car and go and do something to take care of an emergency. So, one consideration there would be to minimize those instances by having a centralized government center. Parking and transportation, very important for the people we serve, also important as it relates to our own vehicles, our own county employees. Clearly safety issues there in terms of making sure we have adequate parking and lighting. And then, of course, the ongoing rent versus financing and funding new infrastructure, as well as other factors, so space availability, existing leases, etc. So lots of things to consider. I wish to reiterate that, in terms of, for example, the financing and funding of new infrastructure, these are things that once the policy level direction is given and the relevant committees, including in this case for financing potentially the debt advisory committee, then we would meet and research and ultimately bring back to those committees and your board recommendations in terms of how we might proceed. Clearly, any major infrastructure project will be expensive, and we need to have our 3 to 5 year strategic plan mirroring board direction in this regard, and with recommendations that we believe are consistent with the direction that you give us, not just here, but on an ongoing basis. And with that, I'd like to note that, among others, from Internet Technology, Director Moore is on the line. From Health and Human Services, Director Allen is on the line. We have Patrick Martin, our facilities manager, and to the extent that other department heads wish to chime in, they're available for questions or perhaps to make a statement. But IT, which I think I neglected to mention, is a huge consideration, for example, when considering decentralizing operations, because just because we rent a building in X town or city does not mean that we're going to have the existing IT infrastructure there to meet our legal mandates and et cetera. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions or hear your discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Von Lotta. Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Krista. That was very thorough, and I think you got to the point. There's always going to be a distributed functions going on. I mean, we have our libraries, we've got our sheriff's substations, we've got enrollment offices where somebody might be for a day a week. These are our priorities that are always going to continue at some level. I don't want to jump ahead of our chair, but for strategic planning, but there are these things that keep coming up, and they've been coming up from my time on the board. I'm sure there's a long history to all of them, but when we start looking at things, do we want to, we're running into this question over and over again. Do we want to be buying property or moving out to Toyon or extending this lease beyond 5 years? I mean, we kind of have to make a decision, not on the little things, but on the big things that will help us guide sort of where we want to go as a committee. And we just, don't want to speak for Amanda, but I felt like on our committee, this is a question that's just sitting over the top of us. If we had some general guidelines, knowing that we're never going to get to 100% one way or the other, it would really help us, certainly help me think about how we're going to plan this out and where we ought to spend our time. If we're deciding to say centralized, well, we're going to need to focus a lot of our time as a committee and as a board on that. If we're not, well, then we have other things to do too. But I felt like I've got a strong opinion, but I need to know where everybody else, we need to know where everybody else is on this. That's all I got, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Fullendorf.
I would concur with everything that Supervisor Garamendi has said. It's making it difficult at the committee level to make decisions or have a conversation that's robust without this type of information coming from the board as a whole.
Very good. Any comments, Supervisor Toffnelli or Ms. Callaway? Or Supervisor Callaway? Madam Supervisor Callaway.
It's really, I can appreciate your committee. It's a really difficult decision, but when I sort of look at it holistically, it's a very expensive decision to weigh. And so for me, I'll look at how long it's taking us to do a DA building. I mean, it has been on the blocks. We know we want it on campus, and we've been talking about it for, I don't know, 10 years, and nothing's happened. So that's one thing, that's to try and bring people onto campus. I just sort of remember the cost of the water sewer system for the jail and what we had to do with San Andreas. It was really very, very expensive. So then I think, okay, so if we buy a building that already has the infrastructure in it, how do we evaluate that cost? And what comes to mind is Health and Human Services building. I mean, to probably buy that building is going to be more timely and less expensive than saying, well, we're going to build something on campus. So maybe we would want to buy Health and Human Services building because we're just not going to be able to build one of that size on our campus in any time in the near future, near being 5 years. I'm interested in what the department head said, Krista. I think specifically, did they want to be on campus? Didn't they want to be on campus? Another question I had is when someone comes in and they need to access maybe multiple services, that should be part of the equation. And I mean, I just happen to think about, what about veteran services? I mean, they're in Valley Springs now, but a veteran needs services from other departments. But so then they have to get in a car and drive from Valley Springs to San Andreas. Maybe that is the kind of department we would want on campus. So, I don't know, I can't answer the question. Should we central? I mean, it's, you flip a coin. I just think we have to look at it as it comes up. I don't want us to say, let's get people on campus. It makes it easier. Maybe for departments, maybe for the public, but we're going to be talking 40, 50 years down the road. So here we are in a committee trying to make decisions. I think it's one of those things we will have to start deciding when the opportunity comes up. I mean, I look at the discussion that we had as this board about the HVAC system. And that was just for a small amount. I mean, it wasn't a small amount, but it was a small amount in relationship to building new facilities on the campus. So maybe it's not a question that we can answer. I mean, I'd like to be able to say, I want you to focus on everybody being on campus. And I don't think that's something that we can easily do. If an opportunity comes up to buy some land because there's a structure there that we can utilize, maybe that's what we need to do. So, as much as I'd like to give Jack and Amanda an easy answer, position that I have, I can't. I'm sorry.
Mr. Toffenelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand what Maria's saying, and I have to disagree a little bit with her on the DA building. We have made more movement in that area than we have over the years that I've been here, and what you say, talk about it. There's no longer a jail next door. There's a building pad ready to go, and that was part of that deal when that came down, was that there would be a pad there ready to go. So we have moved there. There's some issues that we're going to be getting resolved here within the next month that has to do with funding to move forward on the DA's building. So I see that as something that's going to be here relatively quickly for us. As far as the rest of everything else, this is decisions that this committee is going to be making that's going to be permanent, or at least standing for quite a long time past the life of this board now. So these decisions have to be something that considers going into the future. And to me, my preference is to centralize it here on campus as much as we possibly can, wherever we can. I think when somebody comes to the campus looking for a government department or agency, and you have to tell them, no, you got to get back on the highway, you got to drive all the way past 49, down 12, down to Toyon, where 12 and 26 meet, that's where you're looking for it. I don't think that is what a good government system should be. I think it should be centralized, and you should be able to say, no, you just get back in your car and drive down here and drive to the end of this particular parking lot down here, and that's the building on your right. I think it's something that it really truly needs to be, since we're not a huge city, we're not a huge government, we're not really suburban, to where some of those departments are, because they're so huge and they need huge buildings. They're built all around in a huge suburban area or a huge city. I think we are small enough, and probably will be going into the future, that we can have most of, put some type of strategic plan together by this committee to get as centralized as we possibly can. We're talking a lot of money right now. If you look up there, 1.1 million, 800,000 or whatever it was, plus 228,000, you're talking, $2 million in lease money, although it's not all general fund going out. So those are my comments. And I've been pretty straightforward with that, Jack, and Amanda,
To a certain degree, I struggled with this a little bit, as Madam Supervisor Callaway did, trying to picture the whole picture, because we have certain things that, and we can all acknowledge that, don't go on campus next to, let's say, the jail when it comes to victim services, and you wouldn't put that next to the courthouse. Ultimately, the goal, I do agree with Mr. Toffenelli, would be to be centralized as much as possible. But, we need to be cognizant of the fact that it takes time for that. So, that could be something that they put forward in the strategic plan, is to work towards that goal. But until it's attainable, we're still in the same situation. That's my perspective. I mean, it's a long-term goal, is what we're looking at. And I think that goes in hand with what Mr. Garamendi and Ms. Fullendorf said when it comes to how they proceed with their committee, and they need general direction. So I'm personally of the point where I think centralized is a long-term goal when it's attainable, and I think that that's a good goal to the point that we can facilitate that. To a certain degree, we can't, because we can't put everything on campus next to something else. Some services are due elsewhere, as Mr. Garamendi did bring up, libraries. That's simple. That's about all I have to say on it.
Thank you for that feedback. I think other consideration too is just agencies. We've had this conversation at the COG, when it came up to moving that location to the city. And, it always goes back, how do you keep those entities as close to government center as possible? So if it's not on campus, I think the process, Supervisor and Garamendi and I are trying to, how do we keep things close to government center? So if it's not going to be on campus, at least close so day-to-day business can continue and it's not impacted by going completely out of the way. So thank you for that feedback. It's appreciative.
I just want to agree with what Supervisor Follendorf said, and everybody's saying here. I mean, it is a high-level strategic thing. I mean, we're going to have, when we get down to brass tacks, there's always going to be who's going to go where and how can we do things, and we're going to have to figure all that out. And that will be a process over the next 20 years, or forever. But I think that if we have a position that we could help guide our organization with, we're talking about here, it's just going to make it easier. Doesn't mean we can do everything, but at least we're going to try. And before we buy a building, we say, well, should we build it here, and get into the brass tacks, how it would cost and how it would fund it. But if we start with that strategic plan, that's really it. Because we've been playing jazz a long time here, and we've survived. We're not falling apart, so we don't have a crisis we're trying to fix, which is great. But Lewis Carroll wrote in Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going, any direction will do. And if we know, and I think what we're hearing is some direction, and I appreciate the thoughtful comments from this board.
Ms. Callaway.
Okay. Since I seem to be the lone vote. One, the jail was paid for with a grant and a bond, not going out like we did with HVAC. The DAs, we have a fund, whatever, and I mean, it's taken a long time, and like Gary said, we're coming to the point where we're going to hopefully be able to do something. The point is, since we've been doing the jail, and we have the DA in a building, I mean, I remember when they were in this building, and now they're in a building where the floor falls through, and we're still talking about it years later. And my favorite, of course, this is the first year we've ever put money into animal services. And we've been talking about that. The grand jury's been talking about it for 25 or 30 years. So that's why I find it difficult to say, let's centralize. I think what Supervisor Follendorf said, as close to government center maybe as possible. But if we base the decisions on, well, we'd really like them on campus, oh, well, we need to go out for a bond, or we need to go out and find funding for something that'll be at a minimum $1 million, $2, $3, $4. You know, in 40 years, the Board of Supervisors is going to be sitting here saying the same thing. And I guess what I'm trying to get at, for me, it's when an opportunity comes up that we need to do something, like the White Palace, then we should be making a decision then. Is that something we want to buy, or hope the state will give us funding through non-general fund to build a building? Well, I don't know how long we've been waiting for that. So I support as close to government center as possible, but I would hate to hold things up when opportunities present itself to the committee, the board, to debt advisory. Thank you.
I would like to add one thing. In hearing, what Ms. Callaway says, right now we're looking at sort of a global approach from let's say 30,000 feet. To bring it back down, something we talked about before that sort of fits within this criteria, in my opinion, is the one-stop shop for business licenses and centralizing that, even on our own campus, so, as close to government center as possible, let's say. along with the thought strategically, how we can facilitate services to the community better with what we do have on campus and centralizing those even. Just a thought. I'm not trying to complicate it.
No, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that has been a discussion at the Strategic Planning Committee, is what does work look like post-pandemic? And so does the space, does the buildings, are they going to be reflective in any new infrastructure or not? And those are some of the things we have been discussing as well. So I'm glad, how do you streamline those into the existing online services and things like that. So thank you for clarifying that for us as well. I think we were able to get two directions now.
Well, we don't have a consensus on direction yet, so let's clarify that. Is there something further you'd like to talk about, Mr. Toffanelli?
Well, to what you had said and what she's saying the other direction, we've tried that before. It didn't work. It was very controversial, albeit there were several different reasons why. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but I'm telling you, we did try it before, one-stop shop to get permits and what have you, and it was very, very controversial, and it didn't work very well as far as the people that had to utilize the services and the complaints that were said about it. So just be careful if you come back with us with the model, that it's a model that's going to be sustainable. And Ben,
I agree with you 100%, Mr. Toffanelli. I'm very aware of what you're talking about, and as someone that loves their animals, I'm going to go ahead and say the saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And, so, let's try a different way. I love my cats.
and I would be happy to be a guest at your committee meeting, and it is a Brown Act committee, so I can show up and share some information on that past history if you'd like when you get to that, or if you're going to discuss that. So, thank you.
Absolutely. I think our next meeting's next week. Right?
Yes, that will be on June 21st at 2 o'clock.
And I just want to thank the board for their input and giving what I feel is direction. Thank you.
Public comment?
There's no public comment at this time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
I'm sorry, do you want department head talk during public comment, or would that be separate?
You know what? You can go ahead, Miss Allen. I believe that's Miss Allen speaking up.
It is, thank you. Thank you so much for allowing us. This is Corey Allen, your Health and Human Services Agency Director. And the reason I wanted to engage in this conversation a little bit is it is clear when you go through the considerations that the Health and Human Services Agency does have quite a cost. We do have a variety of leases, and it's been really important to us moving forward to really understand what the board's guidance would be so that we're not, going up against that wall. We want to work with you as we make these decisions. They're just so significant. I do have with me today one of our public assistants, supervisors. Her name is Jennifer Pruden, who's also available to answer any questions that might come up around access. But what I want to do is couch the conversation around who we serve in the Health and Human Services Agency. We serve people throughout your communities, and we're vast and we're rural. We have such limited access to telephones, gasoline, and cars for a lot of individuals. At the very lowest incomes, broadband is limited. So access is a huge consideration, and I so appreciate that our CAO has sort of recognized and brought that first and foremost. Access for us means we have to place ourselves as staff second to what the client or the customer needs. Our customers, our consumers, they could very well be in a position where they're unable to leave their home. The closer we get to their homes, on the very outskirts of our community, of our county, the better off we will be doing our job for you. So as much as we appreciate the looking at this longer-term government center, in any case, we would have an outstation because they do reach our constituents so well. An example that was brought up, veterans. The Veterans Outstation is placed for a variety of reasons in Valley Springs. One being, there's a large conglomerate of veterans served in that area. So it's basically bringing the service to where the population resides. That is also placed in a location that removes any stigma. So stigma can often come when you're entering buildings that people may have a preconceived idea about, such as public assistance. Not all veterans are accessing or need access to a public assistance model. Our team there is also mobile. So they regularly hop in a county vehicle and go to the veteran in an outskirt area, bring them to appointments, bring materials to them. There's outstations in 2 different areas that Jennifer will briefly talk about, where we also can have veterans served. So it's just an example of how that model, this hybrid model, meets not only the need for a government center that people can access and find, as Supervisor Tofinelli, you eloquently spoke about. It's like, no one wants to be wandering around looking for a place. I did it, I'm new here, and it took me a little bit of time to find some spaces. But when we balance that with access to individuals who basically are attempting to survive and thrive for short and for long term. With that, Jennifer, if you can just provide just a brief moment of information about what we're talking about.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me. As the outstation supervisor, it is a critical part of our infrastructure for HHSA to be able to serve the underserved within our communities. We've constantly battled transportation issues, internet and phone issues for clients. So being able to take our services to them into the outstation, currently we are in Copperopolis and West Point 1 day a week. Clients can do anything that they need to from an HHSA standpoint. We also are available for veterans to come and have meetings. For our community partners like Tribal TANF to come in and meet with clients so that we are serving people within our community and our local agency partners. So it's been very crucial, especially with the pandemic and people leaving less access to being able to have friends and family get them to appointments. If they can just ask for a ride down the road to the outstation, it's much better than a 45-minute drive to the agency.
Thank you, Jennifer. And so with that, I just want to wrap and say this is a very timely conversation. As your board knows, public health right now is moving at the end of its lease. And when I talk about the importance of our consumers having access, it's also important that staff who are delivering this service have the ability to work in a space that is amenable to that service. And so just keeping that in mind, we are growing, the service needs continue to grow, and so with that, thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Any further board input? Is there any other staff that would like to make any comments to?
Yes, Chair, this is Stan Moore, your CIO, and so I do have a couple of comments that I would like to make at this time as well. The IT services for the county are a centralized service. So we've got one IT organization that supports all of the various departments. Some of the key things that we need to be looking at, I believe, in this conversation have to do with what the ability is for IT to deliver services to the various departments. If you take a look at the key services that departments utilize, a lot of it boils down to the ability to connect to for communications. That's communications back to the
to the main data centers for the county that are in the central location, and then to be able to reach out to the internet. Reaching out to the internet could be for cloud-based business solutions or other internet delivery services. We use the internet to reach out to the world for many of our services. The easiest way, if you will, the most reliable way, the most secure way for us to deliver services to the departments has been for the departments that are part of the main campus. Part of what we need to be looking at for any department that is off the main campus is how are we going to deliver IT services? And that really needs to be part of the strategic discussions and decisions that are made when we are looking at off-campus locations. The complexity and the cost can be significant. The ability to even have the potential to tie in to the main data center and the main network is a critical component. And taking a look at that at the front end is something that provides a great deal of value for the county when we decide whether or not a location is potential and what it will take to provide IT services on an ongoing basis. The various departments that are off campus have done a fine job of working with IT in making these type of decisions. We are brought in for those types of talks, and we appreciate that. And we would like to continue with that process. We would like the strategic planning committee to be looking at what the IT impacts are going to be, centralized or decentralized, and have that early in the process. So we appreciate the partnership, and those are the comments that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. We appreciate it. Any further staff comments? Any board questions or anything to address any of the further comments made by staff? With that, I think you're comfortable with the direction for the time being, with the considerations by the input from staff at the same time. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next item. Item 9, action item, administrative office. Authorize board chair to sign letter to the State Board of Forestry and Fire Protection commenting on the proposed 2021 state minimum fire safe regulations. Ms. Von Lotta, and I believe Mr. Oliver's online also. I'll hand it over to you.
Indeed. And I'm essentially going to hand it over to Mr. Oliver. But as your board is aware, the Board of Forestry has proposed amendments and new rules regarding their fire safe regulations. We are in receipt of a form letter from RCRC that is before your board today. And the question before you is whether to direct staff to amend that letter with our county-specific information or draft another letter to send in anticipation of the June 22nd deadline for comments. And with that, Mr. Oliver.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Doug Oliver, Chief Building Official. Essentially, I do have the copy of the draft letter that was provided by RCRC in front of me. I guess the first step is just knowing what your pleasure is as far as the letter. Do we want to do something that is 100% specific to this county, or to use this format to start, and then include the items that we find most significant to this county?
Any board comments to Mr. Oliver's question, or shall we give Mr. Oliver the opportunity to give his input as to how he feels the approach is? He's done an extravagant amount of research on this, so I'd like to hear to hear what he has to say. All right, we'll move forward with that. Mr. Oliver.
Okay, well, as the template is drafted, I feel that it's sufficient as a starting point. I think it does represent some concurrence with the other counties that are expressing concerns. When you get right down to it, the remaining components that we would need to look at are really some of the bullet points that were already included, which I would say we probably need to modify a few of them. And then any local specifics on the page 1 of this document, where they highlight local specifics such as county description and examples, current fire safe regulations, descriptions of unique topography or geography, that sort of thing, as a starting point before we get into the bullet points of things that we find will not work for this county. Starting off, our geography and topography is very similar to the other rural counties that had expressed a lot of the concerns, such as Shasta and Shasta, Napa, Solano, places like that, where it is mountainous terrain. I feel like the geography, topography isn't too inconsistent with our neighbors. So I don't know if we would necessarily add anything there, but we could identify that the current fire safe regulations as adopted by the Board of Forestry have been effective in the crafting of new subdivisions and in improving fire safety. So going further really isn't going to cause a significant change in the fire safety that would outweigh the cost that the public would have in trying to implement the newer standards. I don't know if you would have any of your board members would wish to comment on that, but in addition to that, county description and examples, I mean, we do need to recognize that we do have 9 fire districts. We have 9 very capable fire chiefs, and they do have staff and equipment that are specifically purchased and maintained to handle this sort of terrain. This isn't something that I believe has been considered in the drafting of this kind of a one rule for everyone type of scenario. So that might be something we want to include moving in before we get to the bullet points. Is there anything that your board would consider adding before we get to the bullet points that kind of go into page 2?
Mr. Tomlinelli, you can go first. I'll follow up if you...
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think what's in any of the bullet points being talked about here, when I went through this Fire Safety Act, and thank you so much, Doug, for providing a copy to me. Nowhere with all if a home gets burnt down from wildfire or moving forward trying to build on a lot that you have, all the qualifications and things that they want, nowhere in any of these bullet points has it talked about the significant, in my opinion, the significant difference in cost that it would be to insure this property, knowing if something is going to be destroyed, what the cost to the insurance companies to rebuild under the specifications that they want done here. And that even includes not even new homes, but existing homes that are out there now, the cost of their insurance going through the roof just because of what's being proposed here if something happens and they have to rebuild. It's just, I think it was going to be astronomical myself. That's my point.
Yeah, no, good point, Mr. Tomlinelli. Something else I also wanted to bring up was, the undue burden that this may apply to homeowners on costs for insurance. I'm going to be a little more specific on, going to 1270.02 purpose, specifically D. And when they do purpose, this is like our findings within our ordinances for justification for reasons why they're putting this forward. in A, it says these regulations have been prepared and adopted for the purpose of establishing state minimum wildfire protection standards in conjunction with the building, construction, and development in the state responsibility area. And after July 21st, 2021, the very high fire hazard severity zones as defined in Government Code 51177I. So I'll go to D and get to my point. By limiting building construction in those areas where these minimum wildfire protection standards are not satisfied, this reduces the risk of wildfire in these areas, which among other things protects the health, safety, and welfare of residents and protects natural resources and the environment. Now, if we understand what D says and we go to page 60, part 1276, I'm going to scroll real quick. 1276. This is about setbacks and developed properties. All building construction should comply with the following provisions of this article. This is Article 5, building, siding, setbacks, and fuel modification. Shall comply with the following provisions of this article, building, parcel, siding, setbacks. You know, it refers to 1276.02C, ridge lines, 1276.06, disposable of flammable vegetation and fuels. So to get to my point, what they're saying is as you read into this further, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, is that they're trying to preserve ridge lines and their environmental fuels up there by not allowing homes to be built. And essentially, this is leaving the burden upon, let's say, CAL FIRE or the local jurisdiction to be able to do fuel reduction there. So in all definition, by what they're saying in their rules, if we were allowed developed properties to build in these areas, then the burden of fuel reduction falls on the developed property's owner. Essentially giving it, fuel reduction. So, I'll read what I did. By definition, allowing ridgeline preservation conflicts with the fact that developed properties would be required to manage vegetation. Undeveloped properties would then be managed by whom? CAL FIRE, county, jurisdiction. Allowing vegetative growth on ridgelines allows a denser fuel load in the areas that are more prone to burning. So essentially, what they're doing here is somewhat backwards from what the overall idea of putting forward a fire safe, the reason they're putting this forward. So I think that's something to note. I don't need to, it doesn't need to be extensive as I've made it, but I think that should be something in the letter. I think it's counterproductive, some of what their ideas are here, and it's most definitely not a one-size-fits-all for California. And I think that California needs to start realizing that what's good for certain urban areas is not good for the state as a whole, and we need to start diversifying our laws as we move forward.
If I may, Chairman.
Yes, sir. Please don't correct me too much.
I think it's important to go through the significant changes as briefly as possible to kind of let you know what's overall going to affect this county, because the ridgeline component, yes, is definitely a concern. If we identify ridgelines as specific items that need to be protected in this county, that particular section alone was designed for those counties who have designated ridgeline protection areas that they're limiting construction in those areas anyway. in order to protect the view, protect the environment, that sort of thing. So this county, as of yet, hasn't specifically identified any ridge lines as areas that need that protecting. Should the county do that, then this section would take effect. So that one may not really affect us if your board decides in the planning process that we have no desire to move forward with any ridgeline protection.
Mr. Oliver, if I may interject in a small part, because it does give the opportunity for CAL FIRE to designate certain ridge lines as such. It says both in there when I read a little bit deeper, but so we're not the only person that may be able to designate said areas. It does refer to CAL FIRE in there, off the top of my head. But I do agree with the general statement that you made.
Very good. I mean, the hard part about this is that once this is codified, interpretations are going to vary. CAL FIRE may have a different interpretation than the Board of Forestry, which may have a different interpretation to ours. And ultimately, when something like this happens, who's going to take the lead? That's gonna be the toughest nut of this regulation, is that if we interpret as necessary for our community, as most regulations are designed to do, is someone going to subvert the local authority in favor of a higher interpretation? That's a classic scenario. I mean, I can go back years on decisions between the state fire marshal versus the California Building Officials Organization, for instance. So it's going to be different. It's going to be challenging, and the interpretations are going to fly. But ultimately, we have a series of things that will affect this county directly, without really any, with a lot less interpretation. The definition of access, for instance, changing the distance that has to comply from not just the building to the road, but the building to the collector road or collector street. That means that your driveway to the collector is going to have to comply with some road standard, and there's several levels, including a reduced standard for areas that have already suffered a wildfire. That leads us to a moving target where we have to, as a county, establish, where does this building fit in the regulations of a road? It gets incredibly complex if we don't have some form of process in place. In addition to that, the requirement for the setbacks applies to, the 30-foot setback rule based on this regulation is another big one, because it applies to all lots in this county. And when you decide to situate a building on there, it doesn't say you can't put it closer to 30 feet. It says that you have to provide some form of mitigation measure if you're going to, and they provide a handful of offsets. Some of them are just untenable. Requiring concrete walls to shield your building from radiant heat isn't really something that factors into the cost of a house now, but that's a significant cost if you're going to, if your lot is small enough that it has to be, situated within that 30-foot setback. Any additional building hardening is one of those examples too. There's no hard list of building hardening measures beyond wildland-urban interface ignition resistance requirements that are in the building code. You can't count those. You have to do something more, and there's no guidance on to what is more. So it leads to a lot of interpretation measures on the part of the fire chief and the building official. And if at any point the state agency decides to inspect, they may decide that there's a violation that we've approved. So that's a huge concern for me, because when we're trying to be flexible and facilitate construction, there is a chance that our inspection authority could be overridden. That is one concern. Another concern is the stored water on site. They reference fire code, which gives you, for a residence, 600 feet from a hydrant, or you provide stored water. They did provide an allowance to use an alternate code for rural firefighting, but that still means you're going to have a minimum of 2,000 gallons, if not closer to 12,000 gallons of stored water on your site if you're too close or you're too far away from a hydrant. That's a significant concern because there's no requirement to maintain that stored water once construction has ended. And I think I can speak for most of the fire chiefs when they say they don't want to hook their engines up to something that hasn't been maintained and try and draft water that either may not be there or may be clogged and cause damage to their pump systems. In addition to that, if it's not maintained correctly, they could pull a suction and actually crush the tank. There's some significant issues with the stored water because they require it. They require fire protection measures for it, and it limits our flexibility in a way that we haven't seen before. Some of the things that we have commented on in the past really haven't changed, however. For instance, the bullet points that are provided on the RCRC letter, I'll point to the second bullet point, which is at the top of page 2. It says, even modest residential lot splits, 3 or more parcels, for example, or business expansion would trigger requirements to bring potentially miles of public roads and bridges up to current standards at the landowner's expense. I will say that that's been on the books for a long time. When they rewrote it, it caused scrutiny. I don't know how many people know that was already there, but I've enforced it in 2 jurisdictions now. That's been on the books for a while, so I don't believe that bullet point really should be provided. But everything else that's on the list, I would say, yeah, that's those bullet points are accurate. I would add a bullet point about the stored water on site and the lack of flexibility for that stored water. I'd probably also go with the added expense of not just the roadway, but the building hardening measures that are vague. There's a lot to work with here when it comes to added clarity, but that clarity leads to other questions. They do specify that there is a very specific exception method now, which mimics the building codes that we currently enforce when someone wants to appeal a code section. Here's how you do it. However, they don't specify whether the Board of Forestry or CAL FIRE is allowed to override a decision made based on that exception process. That's a huge issue. If we're going to delegate this to the local enforcement, it seems that if we make an exception following the exception process, that there is some clarity that will be honored by that state agency. And right now we don't see that in the regulation. So I would point to that as a significant concern as well.
Mr. Oliver, could you repeat which part you wanted to pull on the bullet points because it's already been in code? Can you repeat that?
That would be the second bullet point, which is actually at the top of page 2.
Right, the asserted exemptions? I flipped the page, I skipped a bullet point. Yeah, even the modest it has been code, but we can still disagree with what's been code in the past. So, we could acknowledge the fact that it has been code, but we still disagree with it.
I would agree with that, sir. I would just say that if we're trying to make a point about new regulation, if we place things in there that have been on the books already, it gives them an opportunity to say, well, that's already been there, and you had your opportunity to say that 6 years ago.
I understand that. But, we can still disagree with something that's been on the book for 6 years. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Very good. You can leave it in.
That's just my opinion. Ms. Callaway?
I don't think we should leave it in. I think we're addressing the new rules. I have a real problem with the form letter, as everybody knows. What I would like to see is that we are specific about those things that impact Calaveras County, as Mr. Oliver has talked about, because there was nothing in here on the water at all, was not addressed. And he brought up some good points, and I like just we bullet. I also think we should talk about what we have, and what we have done as a county, such as the one Foothill Fire just did, upgraded for the wildlife fire prevention plan. We have emergency operation plans, our general plan, 4290, we follow that. So there's a lot of things we already have in place in Calaveras County, which is why we think these new regulations are not working for us, because we already have things in place. That is my thought. We have the one about house hardening, because I know that's the sort of sexy topic of the day. I'm kind of making an assumption that is the building codes are updated, that there will be things in there on house hardening. I mean, similar to you have to have sprinkler systems in your homes now when you build a new home. Going back, we have partnerships with CAL FIRE, the fire districts, the U.S. Forest Service, the Park Service. So that's why I think a lot of these regulations are not appropriate for Calaveras County. And so I'd like to see us just focus in on what it is our concerns are that Mr. Oliver mentioned, just bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, what have you. And this is what we have in the county that is helping us. And end the conversation. We have RCRC doing the heavy lifting, and Santa Clara, Jack, that's doing the heavy lifting on behalf of RCRC, isn't it? With them, yeah. So I don't think we should be redundant. We just focus on Calaveras, the impact of the regulations on Calaveras, and the kinds of things that we already have in place. Because the goal for the Board of Forestry is the same as the goal for every single person on this board in the fire districts and whomever. The goal's the same, to do what we can to prevent wildfire in Calaveras.
May I add 2 potential bullet points to this for your consideration?
Mr. Oliver.
One of the things that we normally see when a decision like this is made, and I'll lean back to residential fire sprinklers as an example. There's usually an exhaustive study done to identify that the cost to provide the safety measure is negligible in comparison to the cost of loss of life and property. I haven't seen that analysis done for this this particular regulation. There was a exhaustive federal study done that CAL FIRE used to establish that fire sprinklers are now cost effective in relation to the cost of life lost and property damage. I haven't seen it. If I haven't seen, I could have missed it. It could be out there. There may have been a comment or two in findings of overall cost of the damage or cost in the loss of life, but they haven't been able to compare it to the cost to the property owners across California or even regionally per county. in lost revenue, lost tax revenue, lost construction because of the cost to the customers, in addition to the customers being buildings or builders, what is the cost that they're going to have to shell out to meet all these new requirements? Compare that against the total loss, and now is this feasible? I haven't seen that. That troubles me, because now this is not based on it's not based on science. So that's one thing that we might be able to weave into that, if you wish. In addition to that, man, it was on the tip of my tongue and it just evaporated.
Mr. Oliver?
Yes.
So what you're asking for is an economic analysis of these of the regulations?
Yes.
So just looking at the other side of it, because the state is spending billions on fire prevention or on fighting wildfires, I'm trying to look at it as if we were sitting as the Board of Forestry, and I can hear them say, well, what is the cost to prevent, what is the cost of prevention versus the cost of what we're paying to fight wildfires. So if we could take that economic analysis and focus it in on certain areas versus generally, I think that would be a good idea. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's an excellent question. Because once we get, it wouldn't be, I guess I would say that it wouldn't be appropriate for us to determine the level of complexity of the cost analysis, other than to say, have you done an actual cost analysis, Board of Forestry? And if you have, how is it that you can rationalize the cost that could be detrimental to local fire districts because of migration, because of lack of tax revenue, because of reduced infrastructure fee collection that would hurt local fire because of these? If you haven't done that, how can you say that this is a appropriate regulation? I would want to stay a little broad with it and let them decide if they're going to take that leap and get into the weeds.
I would just note, I think the last bullet point of the model letter does address the alleged failure to look at economic impacts of these regulations.
May I talk to that point briefly? You were, to shore up on the cost of building, when it comes up, it's driving costs and building up in a time when the state is holding counties accountable for building affordable housing, and also at a time when we're in a housing shortage within California. So, that goes to the economic point, to a point. It doesn't necessarily need to be added specifically, but it goes to the economic point also. Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are all very good points, and there is so much to dislike about this that we could literally write volumes about what challenges are with this. But I think we have to think about what we're trying to accomplish with this letter. We have a timeline in which to submit a document to the Board of Forestry. I don't think we ought to have any assumption that the Board of Forestry particularly cares what we have to say and how we'd modify it. So while I think that's a good exercise, I don't think it's germane to the point. The point is probably held in the final bullet point, which is this is an administrative process that we're contributing to as part of a RCRC 37-member team to challenge this. This letter gives us standing because we're dealing with our administrative remedies. And we hope that Board of Forestry will come back and reevaluate what they're thinking of. But I think we should be pretty clear that what we're trying to accomplish here is probably not trying to change their mind, but maybe driving them back to the table to negotiate with us. or with the counties as a whole. I know CSAC is involved in this also. We want them, we had 26 different counties that were on that call. Board of Forestry, I don't think, took one piece of advice from that. So we could take everything out of this letter and just have that last bullet point in there and sign it and probably meet most of the best outcome we could probably have, which is keeping us in the fight.
Jack, my understanding is they have to respond to comments. So if we put in the three, like water isn't even mentioned in this letter. If we put in, this is the impact of your regulations on Cal, and we put in 5 or 6 of the bullets that Doug talked about, and then sign it and move on, would that be acceptable? Because they have to respond to those 5 or 6.
I don't have expertise in that. I really couldn't speak to that.
If you don't mind, I'm going to reel this in a little bit. I like to take public comment, and then after we take some public input, we can, then we can bring it back to the board, and then let's hammer this letter out as a board in its entirety. If you're okay with that, Madam Callaway, Madam Supervisor Callaway.
That's fine.
There's no public comment.
Let's give it a few more seconds, because I know there's quite a few people that sent out emails, but at this time they just may not be aware that we are in session. We'll give it a few more seconds. Nothing? Okay. Back to the board. I'll say I agree with Mr. Garamendi that we're here to support a group. I think that Ms. Callaway's right, adding those bullet points when it comes to water and the other bullet points that Mr. Oliver had brought up, and possibly the undue burdens that Mr. Toffanelli had brought up, are all crucial. I mean, I could go to the point where, including this first paragraph saying, we support RCRC, maybe throwing and CSAC's, comments to this, and then adding bullet points and an conclusion as to Mr. Garamendi's point would be a good place to start. So,
What do you want to do?
I would like the board's input on which way they would like to go with this letter. Ms. Fullendorf.
I would like to see, in addition to what Supervisor Callaway mentioned, with the water on the environmental side, this is a combination of agriculture, because these will impact across the state, not only the environment of the agriculture, but the gross economic side of the agriculture as well. And it's not just here at the Central Valley, it's all over. So that can be a win-win under that last bullet point as well.
Let's have that. Mr. Garamendi,
I have nothing to add.
is there anything here that, on the, how much of the letter would you like to include?
I will, whatever it takes for this group to agree to sign the letter, I'm willing to include.
Okay.
Because I would-
Ms. Callaway, we're going to hear your input.
Well, as all of you know, I hate form letters, and this will just be put in a pile. The key, I think you said, Chair, we started out, we support RCRC and CSAC and their discussions with you, whatever. This is the impact of your regulations on Calaveras County, and bullet them, and that's it. End the conversation, 1 page, and you sign the letter. But, by putting all this in, there'll be 26 other letters just like it. We don't stand out and they have to respond to our bullets. And some of it could be similar to like we did in the general plan. 10 people make the same comment, they answer that. But for example, the ones that Doug brought up that are not in here, and they could be just simple 2 or 3 sentences. And as council pointed out, the board failed to evaluate economic, environmental impact, and just leave that in. And other than that, end the conversation and forget all the other jabber.
Thank you, Ms. Callaway. Mr. Toffenelli.
I'm in favor of whatever it's going to take to get this letter signed. I'm with Jack on it. It may be a form letter, it may be what Marita wants, but I don't see them not doing the same thing, put it in the pile. I'm not sure where you're going with that or what you think, but I understand for years you've been on CSAC, so you kind of take that approach to what CSAC does. But again, I'm with what Jack has to say about it. I'm sure this has been discussed at RC for a great long time, and what the content of the letter should propose. I'm sure Jack had some input in it at that level. But whatever we need to do, if you want to, I understand the water thing. I think it's a valid point. It gives us an opportunity on this letter to add some things specifically for our county on the very front page. And again, I have major concerns of existing homes that are already built and the cost of their insurance going up tremendously once this thing is passed. Because if their homes are destroyed for whatever reason, flood, fire, or whatever, and they go to rebuild, they're going to have to, according to this document, the way it's written, they're going to have to adhere to what's in it, and it's significant. Even their driveways, as you know, Marita, up in your area, very narrow driveways. According to this, it has to be a minimum 14 feet and so forth, and all kinds of stuff. Turnaround, if it's a long driveway, just those, it's going to add tremendously, and insurance companies are going to be looking at that, and they're going to come back and start slapping large amounts of increases on their insurance for existing properties. So I think it's very vital that at least that's mentioned as one of the items as far as expenses, because it's not included in any expense in any of this.
I have a question to piggyback off of that comment. What is CSAC and ICRC doing to address, like, upcountry? I mean, if fire comes through and destroys some of those summer cabins, how are you going to force feds or any of those mountain roads to be able to rebuild them?
Right.
I mean, you can't. Is that getting, not necessarily in this letter, but is that a bigger conversation that's being had elsewhere too? Because that, especially upcountry, with summer cabins, I mean, you're never going to rebuild. Essentially, is what it's coming to.
I can speak to that as it relates to reconstructing after a wildfire. There's a specific component of the existing roads standard that identifies a reduced standard that can be applied to roads in areas that are subject to wildfire. That they're more flexible than your standard existing road as identified by the Board of Forestry. Instead of having a minimum of 14 foot wide, for instance, it's a minimum of 14 foot wide for 22 feet, approximately every 400 feet. So there will be impacts either by your road kind of complies and you have to make a few changes, or your road just may be way off the map. But that does mean that some of our roadways, even though they're not compliant with the new road standard, if there is a fire in the area, a wildfire in the area, the reduced standard might kick them back into play. Ultimately, we don't know what the impact is going to be because we don't have a current map of whether or not our roads are going to comply with these standards. So we have to see, once the board does decide, then we have to go through the process of finding out what they really did to us.
So then the bullet point should be you're killing rural development. Boom. That's the economic and environmental. You just killed any development in rural California.
Right. Absolutely. It's, you know.
So you killed your sales tax, your property tax.
It's not just upper elevations, Amanda. We've all
No,
driven
no,
through certain segments of the county, and there's roads of concern in the same manner. So I'm gonna bring this back again. I'm gonna start making suggestions, and I want to see if the board has approval. First paragraph, yes. Fullendorf?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
No.
Gary?
Yes.
Okay. I want to delete paragraph 2. Of course, we all support statewide efforts to reduce fire risk. We don't need to say that here. We all know that we want reduced fire risk. So, Amanda?
Fine.
Yes.
Okay. Reduce paragraph 3, just to say Calaveras County has significant concerns, and reduce it to a certain degree where we don't need to say the whole paragraph. I mean, if you... by any means. So it's so that we can get more specific with our bullet points, and these are the concerns of Calaveras County. However, Calaveras County has significant concerns regarding the current draft of the fire safe regulations. And keep it as simple as that. And then we start going through our bullet points, and we start adding, I want to go with all the suggestions of the board here. I don't necessarily need to add the bullet points that I had brought up. I mean, they're a little bit overkill, and are not as specific as the concerns that the rest of the board brought up. Mr. Toffanelli's bullet point, I want to bring up the bullet points that Mr. Oliver brought up, and also add into the economic part of it that what Ms. Fullendorf brought up, and make sure we do the water issues as Ms. Callaway had brought up. And personally, I would like to leave all the bullet points that are in there, but that's me. Does anybody have any specific issues with those bullet points? Mr. Toffanelli.
Well, I want to go back to your paragraph 3. What exactly were you saying in paragraph 3? Because I think the last sentence specifically needs to stay in there.
Okay, yeah, I'm hearing you. So sentence 1, and let me read it starting from the first one. However, Calaveras County has significant concerns regarding the current draft of the fire safe regulations. We hope and expect the board will give the concerns expressed by locally elected officials and technical experts the respect and consideration they are due. Just keep it short and brief like that. So we have room for bullet points on the first page. I don't think we're going to get the whole thing on one page by any means, but I think we need to say what we need to say to get it all on there. Miss Edwards, I see you trying to speak, so
I just wanted to note that if we're taking paragraph 2 out, then the first word of paragraph 3 has to come out because it's nonsensical to say, however, if we're taking it out.
Very good point. Very good point. Even with paragraph 1? Yeah, agreed. Striking, however. So first sentence, last sentence.
We can put in whatever.
Whatever.
I would like the letter to be grammatically correct, please.
I will do my best.
And as for the bullet points, I'd like to see Mr. Oliver put the bullet points together.
Right now?
No, I meant the ones he talked about.
Right.
And let him put the bullets together.
I had said that, yes.
try and recommend a format for those bullet points.
And then, can we add the section on agriculture that Ms. Fullendorf brought up? And also, Mr. Toffanelli's bullet point on concerns on, the undue burden on costs for insurance. Is that clear enough, Mr. Toffanelli?
That's fine.
And I'm willing to, based on what we've done here, I'm willing to let staff finish up the letter. And then if the board will approve that, I go in and double check it and sign it at that point. We don't need to sit here and nitpick the words as Mr. Oliver does his bullet points. I have confidence that he will get them in, and Ms. Edwards can grammatically check it for us, Ms. Callaway. Is there something you would like to add?
No.
Ms. Fullendorf. Mr. Garamendi.
You know, a former supervisor who served on this board, Jack Lodato, once wrote a little book about grammar and how to use it effectively, and I will be sure to see if I could find a copy of it. So Ms. Callaway can keep it in the drawer and pull it out when she needs it. Hit us with it.
I'm going to make a note of that name.
Rest in peace.
Lives in San Andreas.
Yeah, Matt Brock's grandfather.
Can I get some clarification before you vote?
I'll get one for you too, Doug.
Thank you. I will need some clarification on two items.
Yes, sir.
One, the specific concern regarding agriculture, Ms. Fullendorf. What is the overall concern?
One of them you mentioned on the road, but I was looking at it more as a broad sense because the development comes in, how is that sprawling and impacts the setbacks. Is a barn, for example, considered some of these buildings on unimproved? There's just a lot of things that are blurred when it comes to agriculture, and are you really going to have some of those impacts that are being on the operation and just the infrastructure. It's just the infrastructure as a whole, and then water, replenishing the groundwater if you're mandating these larger structures, but it's just the economic side of it too. It's just what's the cost of doing business. It's another hardship. Why do those things?
Based on how the regulation is written, there is a disparity because there is exemptions to the roadways and to the standards for agricultural and mining roads, for instance.
You're correct, but as you start to do urban sprawl, and it goes back to what Supervisor Stopper has said with the mandates of housing, affordable housing, trying to get developed, it's conflicted and it's convoluted.
Very good, thank you.
If that makes sense. It's just a broad, it doesn't have to be specific, it's going to be impactful
But then that,
to economic development in a mixed community such as ours, where you have a combination of urban sprawl bouncing up against agriculture, and you have the same issue down in the Central Valley.
I guess I look at that as a county issue, not a Board of Forestry, because we're the ones that have the land use authority. We're the ones that approve subdivisions or developments and lot splits against the impact on ag land.
And then at what point do you become the bully of forcing those lands to change the land authority to accommodate developers and the dollar signs that are coming in because of urban sprawl or development? So that's where I'm looking. I agree with you, it is a local, but they're removing local. They're forcing that local decision-making to push for those type of political decisions for monetary benefit.
I guess
and mandate.
I don't see that in the regulations. I still look at it as those are the decisions that this board makes through their general plan or through their zoning, and the fact that we continue to allow the Williamson Act, and when we don't get any subvention funds, and we've stated that we're an ag county, I truly support those concerns, but I think there are local decision concerns. I didn't see the impact of the Board of Forestry rules impacting those kinds of things that you're concerned about. And so I'm thinking,
The
how's
unintended
Doug gonna?
consequences that we're not going to see, and like Doug said, it's going to be those decisions that we're not going to see until they're realized, and it needs to be mentioned. Because as the Central Valley starts to grow, how many almond orchards are you going to force to come out? I mean, and it's another debate, but the point I am making, Doug, is it needs to be broad. I was looking at a broad scope. That impact.
May I interject, Doug? You did bring up the exemptions for agriculture and mining that are in there.
Yes, for roadways, it would be correct to say that it would impact agriculture in the sense that agricultural buildings that are not used for storage would now be subject to additional building hardening measures that they've previously not been held to, which could increase costs to agricultural businesses. That is a fair statement to make.
Yes. Amanda, you're yes for that?
Yes.
Jack, you're yes. I'm a yes. Ms. Callaway, yes. Mr. Toffenelli, yes. Very good. So, there's one other point that Ms. Callaway had brought up, and I'll let you finish your clarifications, because you had a couple of clarifications you needed there, Mr. Oliver.
Yes, one more, and that is on the insurance. There's two components to that. That is our insurance rate's going to increase relative to these changes, but also I'm aware, having dealt with several disastrous reconstructions, that insurance companies by policy offer a replacement value option that includes 25% increased value for upgrading to the current code standards. It might be worth noting that in addition to the unknown increase in insurance costs, the reasonable assumption that 25% increase in the building value for code updates will not cover the cost of improving roads or additional building hardening measures or increasing stored water on sites. That might be worth adding.
Or even sprinklers.
Yes.
And the required equipment to operate those sprinklers during the times of fire.
So would it be fair to distill it down to the 25% increase the insurance companies offer will no longer cover the cost of upgrades necessary by these regulations?
Agreed. To keep it short and sweet. Yes.
Very good.
I think yes, board? Yes, yes. Okay, there's one other point that Ms. Callaway did bring up that struck me is what we are doing already as a county. Do we want to add those, or is that going to make the letter too long, Ms. Callaway?
It'll make it too long. Make it too long. I want this.
It's a good point. That's why I brought it back up. But so I'll make it too long. Too long, Ms. Fullendorf? Too long? Jeff? Too long? Okay. I'm a yeah. But good point. If I was writing a book right now, I'd definitely add that in.
If I was writing the letter, I'd put it in.
You would? Okay. Mr. Oliver, could we just have a brief summation of that Calaveras County has a multitude of things they're taking into consideration or moving on to address some other fire hazard issues?
You know, we don't need to get into the specific list long, but, you know, something to the point that Ms. Callaway had asserted. Or is that?
How about something to the effect that Calaveras County works closely with the district fire chiefs to ensure that the current standards of 4290 are being met for all new construction in the county. And we've been effective at mitigating measures of new construction.
That's perfect. That's short and sweet. No.
I think maybe adding stakeholders and working with stakeholders.
Okay, so stakeholders and district fire
Partnered
chiefs.
organizations
And-
to reduce the fire, you know, something along that line. Fire risk. Yes, thank you. I'm losing my train of thought here.
Fire jurisdictions and local stakeholders or organizations, yes. All right. Look, do you have clear enough to the point where you can work with Miss Edwards and the CAO to come up with a letter that I could possibly sign later today or tomorrow?
I'll have something for you by the end of the day.
You know, I understand your position, Ms. Callaway. Is the board comfortable to the point where we can put something forward, and are they comfortable with me signing it as long as Ms. Edwards checks my grammar?
Well, Ms. Edwards, Ms. Von Lotta and I have disagreements on grammar.
Okay.
I'll be happy to review it.
Okay, thank you. Or can I get a? Do we need a vote on this, Sarah Edwards? I'm beside myself right now. Is there a vote?
Yes, hopefully Marita trusts my Brown Act interpretation better than my grammar. But yes, I would say that it's an action item, so you should vote on.
I'll entertain a motion as amended by the board in its entirety.
Move.
Thank you, Ms. Vollendorf.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Toffanelli. It's been a rough one. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Passes on 5-0 vote of the board. Let's get to drafting. Thank you, Mr. Albrecht. Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Thank you, Ms. Von Lotta. This is definitely something important we need to get done. So back to where we're at. Look, it's 12:45. Is everyone okay with us pushing through till we get done?
This next item should be very short.
Okay.
Move.
Item 10, action item, County Clerk, Recorder, and Registrar of Voters. 1, introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance adding Chapter 2.90, electronic filing of campaign disclosures to the county code. And 2, authorize a summary publication of the ordinance. Madam Clerk.
Good afternoon, Board. This is Rebecca, the Registrar of Voters, and the item I'm bringing forward now for the ordinance allows the county to put these items, the FPPC items, online, and it allows us to require candidates to file. So it only impacts candidates who raise or spend over $2,000 and get a salary that's over $2,000 from the county. So that's basically the county officials, as in the assessor, recorder, DA, and sheriff, aside from those who are 8,200 filers already. So you guys already are required to file with the state electronically. This puts the rest of the elected officials and candidates required to file as well. The reason we're asking to do this is because the new mandate passed that we now have to put all filings online within 3 days from the filing deadline, and most of those filings hit right during elections time, and staff is very busy, and I'm concerned that without an electronic filing system, we will not be able to meet those requirements.
Any board comments? Ms. Vollendorf?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further board comments? With that, we'll move to public comment.
There's no public comment.
Thank you. I get stuttery after that letter conversation. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Toffenelli. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Fullendorf. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Passes on 5-0 vote of the board. Thank you, Ms. Turner. Supervisors' announcements. And thank you for spelling it right on the agenda. In compliance with Government Code 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on any meetings attended at the expense of the local agency and may make other announcements or report out. Ms. Fullendorf.
I attended the chamber event on Sunday. Miss Allen talked about Dr. Kalita and county staff getting recognized as the Golden Frog. But I also wanted to do a shout out to Mount Plain Hospital, who got Business of the Year for 2020, and all the hard work in assisting the businesses throughout and the community throughout the year of the pandemic. So, and it was a great event, a lot of turnout. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Fullendorf. Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be departing tomorrow morning for Monroe County, so 8,000 feet. Hopefully it'll be a little cooler up there, but not too far. Where we'll be going into this fire regulation and other items for 2 days of pretty heavy debate about it. So I look forward to reporting back with you all.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. We appreciate it.
Mono County?
Mono County.
The
East side.
Will their CAO be involved in that?
Well, our CAO?
No, the CAO of Mono County.
I do not know.
He's our former, Tom
CAO.
Lawton, our former CAO.
No kidding.
Bob.
Oh, Bob.
I will be bringing a fishing pole for the ride back, though.
Smart man. I love that area. I'll pass. Miss Callaway.
You could go in the winter and ski. God, that's the best.
Man, that's
That'd be
fun.
disloyal to Bear Valley and Kirkwood. Supervisor. Remember, keep it local.
So you're fishing on that side of the mountain.
Yeah, but-
What difference is that than not fishing over on our side of the mountain?
We want to save our fish over here.
I have nothing to
Stay
report.
on my fishing hole, Mr. Garamendi.
Catch and release, he's going to put a Calaveras tag on it before he releases it.
Miss Callaway.
Nothing.
Okay. Mr. Toffenelli.
I have nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll adjourn.